Hey there! If your day has been loud, restless, or just a little too fast, you've come to the right place. Tonight, we're not escaping into fantasy. We're slipping into something quieter, calmer, older. Long before mindfulness apps and scented candles, there were other ways to still the mind. And surprisingly, some of the most peaceful techniques came from a world we rarely think of as peaceful, the Middle Ages. This isn't about knights or crusades or castles. This is about the moments between, the ones forgotten by history, when a peasant, a monk, or a healer would sit beside a stream or under a beam of coloured light in a chapel and just breathe. Tonight, we'll rediscover 15 calming meditation techniques used long ago, methods that soothed aching backs, wandering minds, and tired souls. Some are simple, some are strange. All of them are rooted in quiet survival. If this kind of gentle history helps you rest, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it brings you peace. And before you drift off, drop a comment. Tell me where you're listening from. It's always comforting to see those quiet dots on the map. Just names, time zones, and the invisible thread of shared silence. So, dim the lights. Sink into your pillow. Let the weight of the day slide off your shoulders. And let's begin. With technique hash 1. Listening to bells from afar. You're standing just outside the edge of your village. The sun is barely up, draped in morning mist, soft and unhurried. There's no clock, no schedule, no morning briefing, only silence. Until the bell rings. It doesn't come from your own chapel. That bell is broken, the rope frayed, the frame leaning like a drunk after a feast. No, this sound drifts from another village, far away, carried on the wind, a low, echoing toll, distant enough to be almost imagined, but clear enough to stop you mid-step. In the Middle Ages, time wasn't marked in seconds or minutes. It was shaped by sound, and the most consistent sound, especially for those without means, was the bell. Monasteries rang them, not just to call monks to prayer, but to gently portion out the day. Matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext. A sacred rhythm, not for commerce, but for contemplation. And so, peasants learned to listen. Not with urgency, but with attention. This became a form of meditation. You'd pause, turn your head slightly, and just listen. Not for the message, but for the space around it, the silence that cradled the sound. You might close your eyes, breathe slowly, and count the tolls. Not to keep track, but to ground yourself in something real, something shared. No matter how far the abbey, how foggy the morning, that sound connected you. One peasant might be chopping wood, another weaving flax, a third just sitting in a field, but they all stop, they all listen, and for a moment, time aligns, even in suffering, even in loss, even in bone-deep exhaustion. The bell doesn't judge, it simply arrives, then fades, and with it, you exhale. This technique wasn't named, no one wrote it down, but it lingered in the lives of those who heard it, morning after morning. The quiet awareness of something distant, dependable, and bigger than yourself. Try it now. Close your eyes. Imagine that sound cutting through the air like a ripple in a still pond. Let it come. Let it fade. Then open your eyes and carry on. The rosary breath. In a small chapel tucked into the side of a crumbling hill, a woman kneels. She's not reading, not whispering, not asking for anything. She's breathing, slowly, one bead at a time. You probably think of the rosary as a tool for prayer, and it is. But for many medieval people, especially women, it was also something more private, more internal, a rhythm, a meditation, a way to return the body and mind to something slow and still. In this world, books are rare, education even rarer, but the rosary, made of wood or bone or dried seeds, is common, passed down through families, worn into softness by calloused hands. Here's how it worked. Each bead wasn't just a prayer, it was a breath. Inhale with your fingers resting on the bead. Exhale as you move to the next. No rush, no goal. Just breath following breath. Bead following bead. You didn't need to say anything aloud. You didn't even need to believe deeply in the words. What mattered was the repetition, the tactile comfort, the soft click between your fingers, the feeling of something old, something unchanged, guiding you through whatever storm your day had brought. Even the poorest could own one. And in a time when nothing else was in your control, not the weather, not your health, not the taxes, you could still choose this, to sit, to breathe, to move your fingers across familiar shapes, and in doing so, let the weight of the world lift, even just for a moment. Many use the rosary not as a duty but as a sanctuary, a place to retreat to, not with walls and a roof but with rhythm and breath. So tonight, imagine that rosary. Feel the curve of the bead beneath your fingers. Breathe in, breathe out. Move gently to the next, and the next. And remember, in the Middle Ages, peace wasn't a luxury. It was something you built for yourself. Bead by bead, breath by breath. Watching the shadows crawl, there is no clock on the wall. No ticking, no digital display, no countdown. Time in your small medieval world is measured differently. Not in numbers, but in movement. And the most trusted keeper of time? The shadow on your floor. Each morning, as sunlight spills through a warped wooden shutter or an arch slit in stone, a dark line appears. Sometimes sharp, sometimes hazy. It stretches across your packed earth floor, touching a woven mat, a corner of the hearth, or the foot of a stool. And you watch it, not out of boredom, not because there's nothing to do, but because in that moment, it's the only thing moving slowly enough to follow. This simple act, observing the sun's shadow crawl, was more than idling. It was a form of anchoring, a quiet, passive meditation. Peasants and monks alike would pause during moments of fatigue or prayer to glance at these sun-shaped slivers, watching them slide across walls and floorboards like whispers of passing time. It wasn't about tracking minutes, it was about letting go, because the shadow didn't demand anything. It didn't rush or ask or pull. It just moved, a reminder that everything else, your troubles, your fears, your aches, were also passing. Some even used it to breathe, one breath for every inch the shadow shifted. Others would lay a pebble where the line had been, checking back later to see how far it had crept. A small ritual, a private reassurance. In a world loud with wind, labour and pain, the shadow's quiet progress said, "You are still here. Time is still moving. You can let it move without pushing it. Try it now. Turn off your phone, sit by a window, and just watch. Let the light shift across the floor or wall. Breathe with it. Don't chase it. Just follow. Because sometimes, doing nothing is the most ancient kind of peace. The wool spinner's trance. The room is dim and warm, not because there's a fire, wood is scarce today, but because you've been working long enough to forget the cold. You sit on a low stool, posture bent just enough for your shoulders to ache slightly, but you don't shift. In your lap, a bundle of wool, rough, tangled. It catches the light in quiet threads. In your hand, the spindle. You pull, twist, spin, pull, twist, spin, over and over. This is not a task for the impatient. It's slow work, steady work, and in time your body learns it without you. Your fingers move with muscle memory. Your mind drifts somewhere else. That's when it happens, the trance. Medieval women, especially in peasant households, spent hours spinning wool for garments, bedding, rope and trade. It was seen as labour. But for many it became something else entirely. A kind of moving stillness. The act of spinning created rhythm, the feel of the fibres slipping smooth, the slight tug of resistance, the spin of the weighted spindle dropping down like a pendulum. As your hands worked, your thoughts would slow, breath would deepen. The world outside, weather, debts, hunger, faded to a soft blur. Some women would hum, others whispered psalms under their breath, one for every foot of thread they spun. The rhythm created its own silence, its own heartbeat. Modern minds might call it flow state, a blend of mindfulness and focus. But back then, no one gave it a name. It was simply the wool spinner's trance, a daily doorway into peace. Even children watching their mothers spin would mimic the motions, imagining that one day they too would enter that same quiet zone. It didn't require stillness, it didn't require solitude, just rhythm and repetition, and trust in your hands to carry your thoughts safely through. Tonight, imagine your own hands spinning something simple, something useful. Feel the twist, the drop, the pull. Let your breath follow the motion. Let your mind soften at the edges. This was the kind of peace peasants made for themselves, not found but crafted, one thread at a time. The window watch. There is a moment in every medieval home, just after the chores are done, but before the evening meal, when the light leans in. Not golden, not brilliant, but soft, filtered through uneven glass or a patch of cloth drawn tight across the hole in the wall that counts as a window. You sit near it, not to look out exactly, but to look through. The window in a peasant's home was rarely more than a slit in the wood or a patch of horn scraped thin. It didn't offer much of a view, perhaps just a wedge of sky, the bend of a tree limb, a bit of the path where your neighbour sometimes walks. But that was enough, because this practice, quiet, unspoken, unrecorded, was one of the most consistent forms of stillness available. The window watch. There was no goal to it, no list of things to observe, no breathing pattern to follow. You just sat and let the world pass through your eyes. Clouds shifting, birds hopping, a chicken pecking at something you couldn't quite see. Some people would hold a piece of bread or a carved stick in their hands while they watched. Others braided strands of grass or smoothed fabric folds in their skirts. There was no pressure to think big thoughts, no expectation of insight. It was simply a pause. And in a world of endless movement, of digging, hauling, sweeping, carrying, that pause became sacred. Some villagers said the window was where the world spoke in whispers. Others claimed it was how God watched you, and how you watched back. But most didn't explain it at all. They just made time for it. 10 minutes, maybe 15, just long enough to feel small in a good way, to remember that the wind moved whether you prayed for it or not, that the world didn't hinge on your labour. Tonight, picture that tiny window, rough at the edges, cool air brushing against your skin. Sit beside it in your mind. Watch the nothing that becomes something. Let your eyes unfocus. Let your shoulders drop. No lessons here, just quiet. And sometimes, that's all meditation really needs to be. Walking the field's edge. The workday is over, or as over as it ever gets. The tools have been leaned against the hut. The firewood has been gathered, the animals penned. And now, as the last of the daylight pulls itself low across the hills, you step away, not far, just to the edge of the field. You walk slowly, boots pressing into damp soil, hands folded behind your back or dragging softly through the tall grass. You don't speak. You don't look for anyone. This is your time, a silent rite known only to you and the land. For the medieval peasant, the field's edge was more than just the border of your labour. It was a place to remember you were not your labour. It was where the noise of the day met the quiet of the earth. and in that narrow strip between rows of barley or fallow dirt, a kind of peace unfolded. Walking meditation wasn't called that back then. No one instructed you to count your steps or align your breathing, but it happened anyway. With each footfall, the chaos of the day softened. You noticed small things, the sound of a beetle in the stalks, a bird darting low across the furrows, the faint shimmer of dusk over distant thatch roofs. It didn't matter if your feet were sore or your stomach empty. This walk wasn't for fixing anything. It was for remembering that you were still here. That despite the cold mornings, the aching knees, the taxes, the hunger, you had made it through another day. Many peasants, especially the elderly, used this time to whisper prayers not for miracles but for continuance, for the weather to hold, for the children to stay healthy, for the seeds to rise. Others said nothing at all. Just let the quiet stitch itself across their chest like a warm shawl. Some would stop at the same patch of grass every evening and sit, or just stand with hands on hips, staring into the distance where trees blurred into blue. This wasn't idleness, it was recovery, a reset. The field's edge was where the day unraveled its final knots. Tonight, imagine your own edge. It could be a balcony, a hallway, even the corner of your room. Take a moment to walk there in your mind. Slowly. Feel the ground beneath you. Notice something you never noticed before. And let the day slip off your shoulders. This is how they endured, and how you can too. The candle gaze. It's late. The hearth is nothing more than a dim circle of red ash. The wind has settled, and the animals, if you have any, are quiet in their pens. You light a candle. Not because you need to see. There's nothing left to do. No sewing, no scraping, no stirring. You light it for the flame. The candle sits on a flat stone or the stump of a broken stool. Its tallow melts slowly, feeding the wick. The flame dances just slightly, alive but not anxious, and you watch. In medieval life, the candle wasn't just light, it was presence. It was used for prayer, for signalling, for marking sacred space. But for many who had no words left by nightfall, it became something more primal, a source of calm. This practice, gazing into flame, goes back further than even the Middle Ages. But in drafty huts and stone monasteries, it became a silent ritual, a kind of meditation without thought. You sit close, not so near to feel the heat, but enough to see the flame's shape, how it narrows at the tip, how it leans slightly when you exhale, how it flutters and rights itself again. Some people whispered prayers during this. Others traced the shape of a cross in the air, then said nothing at all. The candle didn't demand belief, only attention. Your breathing slows, your shoulders drop, and for a while your mind joins the rhythm of the flame, flickering but not frantic, alive but still. It's a reminder. You don't always need answers. You don't need plans. Sometimes you just need to witness something simple, something glowing, and know that it's enough. Even now you can try it. Light a candle, dim the room, watch the flame. Let your thoughts quiet in its warmth. Let it become the only movement in the room. Let it hold you, gently, in its tiny golden arms. This was the kind of peace a peasant could afford, and that means it's a peace you can reclaim, even now. The prayer rock, silence. You know the path by heart. It winds through the back field, past a low stone wall and a thicket of bramble. The soil is uneven. The grass crunches underfoot in summer, sticks to your boots in spring. You're not going anywhere in particular. You're going to the rock. It isn't marked on any map. There are no maps. But every village has one. A boulder, smooth on top, sometimes with a faint groove worn by knees or time. Some say saints once knelt here. Others claim it was split by lightning. But no one really cares about that, because this is where you go when you need silence. prayer rock isn't inside a church. It doesn't echo like stone halls or smell of incense. It's not watched over by monks or icons, it's just there. Still. Patient waiting. You kneel if your joints allow it, sit if your back protests, lie flat if your spirit needs that kind of surrender. And you say nothing. This isn't the kind of prayer with words, it isn't confessions or requests. It's the kind that lets the earth listen on your behalf. You let your mind empty, let your hands rest in the dirt or on the lichen that's grown soft across the stone. You listen, not for voices, not for angels, just for stillness. Sometimes you hear wind through the branches, sometimes a crow in the distance, sometimes your own heartbeat, ticking like a slow drum in your chest. And when it's time to go, you don't get a sign, just a breath, a looseness in the chest, a small sacred quiet that you'll carry back with you. Modern life rarely allows for silence like this. Even now your mind might be pulling toward a message, a screen, a sound. But what if you gave it just 5 minutes? What if you imagined your own prayer rock? What if you knelt beside it in your imagination, let the world fall away, and listened to nothing? Because sometimes that's where the healing hides. Not in action, not in effort, but in presence and quiet. That's what medieval peasants understood. The earth does not interrupt, and silence, when chosen, becomes its own kind of prayer. The river's spell. You walk until the sound changes. First, it's the low thud of boots on dirt, then the hush of tall grass brushing your legs, and finally, there it is, the soft murmur of moving water. The river. You don't come here to wash. Not today. You don't come to fish or fetch water. You come for the sound. The river speaks in a language older than Latin, older than kings. It babbles and bends, never rushing, never stalling, just being. Peasants often walked to rivers when the weight of the world grew heavy, when the taxes didn't add up, when the fields were cursed with mould, when someone in the house coughed too hard and too long. They'd sit by the water and let it talk over them. You find a spot on the bank, a place where the roots twist out of the ground and the moss grows thick and damp. The breeze carries the scent of wet stone and new reeds. And then you do the hardest thing of all. You stay still, watching the surface ripple, noticing where the water darkens with depth, tracking a leaf as it rides the current and vanishes around a bend. This isn't entertainment, it's something deeper, because as you sit, your thoughts slow. The river doesn't want your worry, it doesn't care about your failures, it just invites you to match its rhythm. Inhale with the burble, exhale with the eddy. Let your breath be shaped by what you hear, not what you fear. Some medieval folk believed rivers could take pain from you. If you confessed to them, whispered your burdens into the water, they'd carry them away. Down past the mill, past the village, into the wide unknown. Others said rivers could remember you, hold your silence like a promise, return it to you cleaner. Tonight, imagine your river. Let it run behind your thoughts, a steady current you don't need to control. Let it carry the noise out of your chest. Let it remind you that peace doesn't always come in stillness. Sometimes it flows. This was the spell of the river. Not magic, just movement. Just sound, just surrender. The hourglass mind. There's no clock in your home. Time isn't divided into minutes and seconds. It's measured by the sun, by the shadows on your wall, or the ache in your back from bending too long. But today you're using something different. A simple hourglass, a wooden frame, 2 glass bulbs sealed tight, and inside, sand. Fine, pale, and steady. You didn't make it. It was passed to you, or bartered, or brought from a monastery by a travelling monk. It's a rare thing in a village like this. Almost sacred, And so, when you flip it, you don't rush. You watch. The grains fall like a whisper, constant, delicate, each one a moment letting go. Peasants didn't use hourglasses to count time. They used them to hold it, a pause, a promise, a stretch of silence where nothing needs to happen, except the falling of the sand. Some used the hourglass during prayer, others to mark a task. I'll spin wool until the sand runs out. But for many, it became something else entirely, a meditation of movement and a patience, because unlike a clock, the hourglass shows you the shape of time. You can see what has passed. You can see what remains. You can watch it narrowing. And somehow, that makes it easier to breathe. You might sit and let your thoughts settle with the sand, each worry falling, each regret softening. There's no alarm, no ticking, just gravity and surrender. In a world where days were dictated by work and weather, this small ritual gave peasants a kind of invisible boundary, a place to say, for this span of sand I rest. Tonight, imagine your own hourglass. Turn it in your mind. Watch the grains begin to fall. Let them take your rush-in thoughts with them. Let each moment land quietly, without pressure. This is how they made peace with time, not by chasing it, but by watching it flow and letting it pass without fear. The bell that never rang. In some villages, far from abbeys and courts, there was no bell tower, no metal tongue to strike the sky and mark the hour. And yet, time moved, and silence spoke. But some peasants kept a bell anyway, a small one, hung from a wooden beam, rarely rung, not for waking, not for warning, but for stillness. This bell wasn't meant to be heard, it was meant to be seen. You'd sit across from it, early in the morning maybe, or at dusk, just a few minutes. Not long, and you'd look at it, not waiting for it to ring, but remembering that it could, that it held potential, and so did you. This was the bell that reminded you of the space between things, between chores, between thoughts, between what hurt and what healed. Monks in distant cloisters had bells to call them to prayer, to mark matins and vespers and compline. But here, for the peasant, the bell was different. It wasn't instruction, it was invitation. To pause, to breathe, to do absolutely nothing. Sometimes people placed a candle near it, or a sprig of herbs tied with twine, not as decoration, but as anchors, things to look at while your mind wandered gently like smoke through rafters. You didn't have to think noble thoughts or speak words aloud. The act of sitting before the bell, of noticing it, of honouring its silence was enough. It reminded you, stillness isn't emptiness, it's readiness, it's fullness, waiting. Tonight, picture your own bell, hang it in the space behind your eyes, let it remain still, let it be the centre of a quiet you didn't know you needed, and know that when you sit in silence you join a long line of people who did the same, without fanfare, without applause, just with presence. The stone stack ritual. You don't need a chapel for this, just a pocket of earth and a few quiet minutes. At the edge of the village, maybe by the tree line or beside a half-fallen fence, you find a small clearing. There's nothing special about it, except that you've chosen it. And scattered nearby are stones, not cut or shaped, just smooth and solid from years of wind and rain. You kneel and begin to stack, one stone atop another. No mortar, no glue, just balance. It's harder than it seems. The weight must centre. The angles must trust each other. Your hands learn the pressure of the earth, the patience it demands. This ritual wasn't written about in books. It was whispered through habit, passed from hand to hand. A peasant might stack 3 stones before a long day in the fields, 5 stones after a death, 7 when the rains finally came. There were no rules, only rhythm, only meaning made in the moment. Each stone you place pulls a thought from your chest, a memory, a grief, a hope. And when the stack finally stands, tall or crooked or leaning like a tired shoulder, you breathe. You don't bow, you don't speak, you just leave it there. A little altar to your presence, a monument to the calm within you. In some villages, people returned days later to find their stack still standing. Others found them toppled by wind or sheep or time. Either way, it didn't matter. The practice wasn't about permanence, it was about pause. The quiet you found while you built it, that was the point. Tonight, imagine your stones. Picture their shape, their cool weight. Stack them in your mind, slowly, deliberately, and when your stack is complete, sit beside it for a while. Not to admire, but to rest. This was how they coped when words failed, when the world was too loud. They built balance with their hands and found peace one stone at a time. The cloak over the eyes. The fire is out. The straw mattress still holds the shape of your body from last night. You sit on it, not to sleep, but to see nothing. You reach for your cloak, coarse wool frayed at the edges with a faint scent of wood smoke and weather. You fold it once, maybe twice, and lay it gently over your face. No light, no distractions, just darkness. This was a meditation not of breath or posture, but of deprivation. The cloak over the eyes, a moment of chosen blindness in a world too full of sharp images, blood on tools, crows in fields, rotting food, weathered faces that say everything without a word. When you lay the cloak across your eyes, you turn inward, not in fear, but in stillness. You feel your eyelids flutter against the cloth. You notice your heartbeat in your ears, and after a while, you begin to feel the room differently. Through skin, not sight. Through warmth, not warning. In monasteries, novices were taught to contemplate in darkness. But peasants had their own way. They didn't quote scripture or chant psalms. They just hid from the world long enough to remember they had a self. A quiet, breathing self that didn't always need to see to understand. For some, this practice became a kind of rebirth. 5 minutes of darkness, 10. No more than a stolen pocket of night in the middle of the day. Then, when they removed the cloak, the world looked softer. The hard edges dulled, the chaos blurred. You can try this too. Take a piece of cloth, something familiar. Lay it gently over your eyes. Breathe. Let the images fade. Let the inner noise hush. Let the dark feel like safety, not fear. This was their refuge. Not a building, not a sanctuary, but the simple gift of less. No light, no weight. No need to act, just quiet. And wool. And you. The grain circle prayer. You don't go into the field to work. Not this time. You go before the sun rises, when the dew still clings to the stalks and the world hasn't fully woken. You walk between rows of barley or rye, letting the rustling of grain brush against your arms. And when you reach the clearing, the small, flat space where nothing grows quite right, you begin. You move in a slow, deliberate circle. Feet pressing into soft dirt, head bowed, hands loose at your sides. You're not making a ritual, you're returning to one that's older than you. The grain circle prayer wasn't written down, but it lived in the muscle memory of generations, a slow walk through the centre of what fed you. Peasants had no shrines, no temples, but the field, this sacred patch of earth that bore life from nothing, was its own cathedral. And the circle you walked wasn't a performance, it was a whisper, a vow, a way to say thank you without saying anything at all. Each step a breath, each curve of the circle a thought released. You didn't need to name the weight in your chest, you just walked it out, around and around. Some say if you walk the circle with an open heart, the grain grew taller. Others believed it protected your family from illness. But most didn't ask for miracles. They just needed a place to feel small and steady at the same time. Tonight, Picture that circle. Not grand, not perfect, just worn earth, golden stalks, and your body moving through the middle of it with quiet reverence. You don't need to speak, you don't need to kneel, just let the rhythm take over. Let the steps ground you. In a world where every day meant survival, this was their version of peace. A slow spiral through the heart of what mattered. Feet in the dirt, mind in the silence, soul in the loop. This was prayer, without words, without witness. And maybe tonight, it can be yours too. The feather and the flame. It starts with a feather, not from a goose or a hen, those are too coarse, but something lighter, a dove maybe, or a small bird that left this behind on your windowsill. Soft as breath and pale as ash. You keep it, carefully, wrapped in a piece of cloth or tucked into the wooden edge of your window frame. At night, when the chores are done and the sky has fallen into ink, you light the smallest candle in the house, just one, a stub of tallow smoking faintly at the edges. Then you take the feather and begin to move it, slowly, back and forth, over the flame. Close, but not touching. This is not a game. It's a meditation passed down from the few who knew stillness intimately. Midwives, herbalists, the quietly wise. The feather and the flame. A ritual of opposites. Air and fire. Softness and danger. Control and surrender. You watch the flicker of the candle respond to your motion. The way the flame pulls and leans. The way it shrinks and stretches with your breath. No thoughts, no prayers, just presence. This was how medieval peasants tamed their restlessness, not with lullabies or chants, but with the tiniest dance between light and air. They believed the flame could hear your thoughts, that it swayed in rhythm to your fear, your calm, your hope, and when the feather moved steadily, without tremble, it meant your mind had stilled too. There's beauty in how small it is. No one else would notice it. No one else would care. But in that moment, with your fingers moving delicately through candlelight, you become a part of something much older than sleep. You become silence made visible. Tonight, you can try this yourself, even just in your imagination. Picture the flickering glow, the soft sweep of feather across air. Let your thoughts flutter like the flame, and let your breath guide them back to center. Because in the end, peace doesn't need to be profound. Sometimes it's a feather and a flame, a dance with nothingness, and a heart that finally rests. And so we return, not from a great journey, but from a quieter one. 15 moments, long forgotten by history, still alive in the silence between your thoughts. No monuments were built for these practices, no chronicles recorded them, but they survived. In fields, in corners, in quiet repetitions that no one noticed except the ones who needed them most. Medieval peasants didn't chase peace, they created it. Out of earth, wool, wind, and stillness. And tonight, maybe you felt a little of it. That ancient slowness, that deliberate quiet. Maybe one of these techniques will stay with you, not as something to do, but as something to be. If this helped you find even a flicker of calm, like the dance of a flame or the hush of a folded cloak, consider liking the video. Maybe subscribe. Only if it truly brought you peace. And let me know in the comments. Which technique spoke to you most? Where are you listening from? And what time is it, right now, wherever you are? It's a strange kind of comfort to know that scattered across the world, people are falling asleep to the same slow story. Wherever you are, may your night be soft, may your breath be steady, and may your dreams be touched by the quiet wisdom of a world that never rushed. Good night.